Hello, World Economic News for Friday, and we'll start with the Financial Times and Martin Wolf with a horribly complex article entitled Waiting for the Great Rebalancing. I had a half an intention of just doing the entire World Economic News off this one article, going through it and explaining what I understood by it. But it's Friday and we don't need that sort of thing. It starts, pressures are building up for a rebalancing of the world economy. The private sector has long been trying to send large net flows of capital from the world's relatively sluggish rich countries to its dynamic emerging ones, etc. That's how it starts and goes on. This is the idea where I get the idea that you could think of it as established, aristocratic, the established wealth of a nation going, yes, well, this is what we did 100, 200 years ago. We all have to go through it, to join the club. Kind of an initiation. They've got to go through it. Everyone has. As in, China and India have got to set their peasants to work making stuff for us, and we just send them bits of paper for it, and that's part of their initiation into the great world of high finance and economics, and that's just the way it is. And it's not just that, it's even more comical. We send them bits of paper, and the arrangement is actually that they even send us the bits of paper back so we can recycle them back to them again. It is a comical system, and as Wolf stresses in this article, rebalancing is necessary, but how, he does not imagine how it can be done. Anyway, moving on, an example, another paragraph from this article. Whatever the role of the uphill capital flows in causing the crisis on which controversy reigns, it is agreed that full recovery demands a rebalancing. In the post-crisis world now, hitherto buoyant households spending in the US and other affected countries, the West, is likely to be weak. As deleveraging proceeds, non-financial corporates have been running financial surpluses, an excess of retained earnings and other overinvestments for a long time. This has now left governments with huge deficits. If the latter are to be reduced while sustaining recovery, massive shifts in the external balance are needed. Now, this is why I didn't go in for explaining all this. It does become a bit boring, doesn't it? But there are a couple of things in there. That is an acceptance that if there is net saving by the people, there needs to be net spending by the government, and vice versa. And the bit I've underlined in yellow there, hitherto buoyant household spending in the US and other affected countries, the West, is likely to be weak as deleveraging proceeds. So proceed we shall to this interesting chart. Bureau of Economic Analysis, Credit Suisse, has put it together and entitled Let Them Drink Tea. They're trying to be funny, but let's get to the facts that they're trying to bring out in this chart. The red line that's going top left to bottom right is wages as a percentage of personal income. You can see in the 50s it was hacking up towards 70%, and that's the sort of number I would have imagined, 70% of wages as your personal percentage of your personal income. Investments might make up 30%, but wages make up most of your personal income. But you can see what it's done since the 50s right to now, bottom right. It's just barely over 50% now of wages making up personal income. I find that a shocking figure. Presumably its investments of various kinds are making up the difference. And the blue going bottom left top right is transfer payments. The United States, obviously this is, as a percentage of personal income again, and that's the right hand scale going from just under 4% to 18-19%. So some people are making up the wages that they don't have anymore with investments, and others are making it up with transfer payments. Interesting. Moving on. Financial Times again. Norma Cohen Actually, this isn't the Financial Times, but it's Norma Cohen. Annual household incomes fall for the first time since 1981. Now we're back in the UK. The purchasing power of households fell last year. The first fall for any full year in 3 decades and the deepest for a 12-month period since 1977. The data from the Office of National Statistics underscores growing concerns from a variety of industries on the ability of Britain's hitherto indefatigable consumers to drive overall economic growth. This is just to show consumers in the UK are under pressure, as they are in the US, as they are in the Western world. And this whole cycling, these flows are dependent on the West buying the Chinese and Indian goods and recycling the money round and round. But there must be demand, and the demand must come from the West because the East is not rich enough. Later in this article we get, so far consumers have been able to offset the combination of slow wages growth and high prices growth with gains that they have earned from the fall in mortgage rates. And what we've had to keep this cycle going has been a way of making the West feel rich, which was house prices going up. We've had stock market prices going up, the tech boom, which kept people spending. Then we had house prices going up, which made people feel rich, which kept them spending, which kept the cycle going. And now we've got mortgage payments going down, so they've got disposable income to spend to keep this whole world turning. Back in the United States, they to give more disposable income, they had a 2% drop in tax on Social Security payments. And this chart from Bank of America Merrill Lynch shows that increases in food and energy prices by April will have eaten into all of that. Already gone by April, and food and energy has eaten away the discretionary income extra boost that was given with the tax cut. So that is gone. Back in the UK, this is to show, I could have done Europe as well, but I'm doing just flip-flop between the UK and the US, because similar things are going on to have in mind. False Economy blog, far from cutting debt, Osborne's plans will make it soar. Early last year, George Osborne, he's the money man for the UK, or the money boy. Early last year, George Osborne described private debt as the cause of the financial crisis and pledged to make it more sustainable in future. Sustainable debt. And we get towards the bottom of the article with this. Here we can see in the chart accompanying the impact of Osborne's changes over the next 3 years. Public debt in green down 43 billion, if they can get through that. I doubt it, but there we go. But private household debt up by 245 billion, 5 times as much. This should not come as a huge surprise in today's Financial Times. One City economist notes that with real household disposable income set to fall this year through a combination of flat employment, negative real wages, tax rises and benefit payment cuts, the only way we are going to see spending grow in 2011 is if savings ratio falls. In other words, people save less and don't save, spend, or in fact borrow. Given the tax and benefit changes Osborne is presiding over, households have little choice but to borrow more to make ends meet. And that is how Osborne plans to drive down public debt, by increasing the household debt that helped cause the crisis in the first place. Growth is essential. Growth must come from somewhere. Growth is going to come from private spending or government spending. In the UK, the government says it's not going to spend, so the private people must spend. If they haven't got the money, they've got to bloody well borrow it. Vanity Fair. An article by Joseph E. Stiglitz. Of the 1%, by the 1%, for the 1%. Americans have been watching protests against oppressive regimes that concentrate massive wealth in the hands of an elite few. Yet in our own democracy, 1% of the people take nearly a quarter of the nation's income, and inequality, even the wealthy, inequality the wealthy will come to regret. Obviously playing on the thing that these North African and Arab sort of revolts against wealthy elites running the country. The West don't seem to know a similar thing has happened there in their place. And it finishes with, it's no use pretending that what has obviously happened has not in fact happened. It has happened. The upper 1% of Americans are now taking in nearly a quarter of the nation's income every year. In terms of wealth rather than income, the top 1% control 40%. Their lot in life has improved considerably. 25 years ago, the corresponding figures were 12% and 33%. One response might be to celebrate the ingenuity and drive that brought good fortune to these people, and to contend that a rising tide lifts all boats. That response would be misguided. While the top 1% have seen their incomes rise 18% over the past decade, those in the middle have actually seen their incomes fall. Again, how the bloody hell are they going to do this spending if they haven't got any incomes extra to spend? No growth from the middle equals no growth. The rich are doing their best. They are spending. But you can't run a country like that. Stiglitz finishes with, the top 1% have the best houses, the best educations, the best doctors, and the best lifestyles. But there is one thing that money doesn't seem to have bought, an understanding that their fate is bound up with how the other 99% live. Throughout history, this is something that the top 1% eventually do learn. Too late. Stiglitz obviously saying that revolution is just round the corner for the United States if they don't mend their ways. And I must admit I am amazed. I look upon Wisconsin and Ohio and I wonder, what the bloody hell do they think they're doing? I mean, I just can't imagine why. What do people think they're doing? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, or what people are doing is right or wrong, but what are they thinking, these people that want to take negotiation rights away from the public unions or any unions? Or why does anybody want to drive down anybody's wages? Why do they do it? Do they think they're going to get a cut of those wages? Can't they see that there is a huge drive? Two things going on. There's great circulation of funds going round, but the toffs that understand that they must go through this haven't quite noticed the enormity of China and India, and maybe they have, and the fact that world average wages now have plummeted with all these extra people coming into the workforce. And maybe they have noticed and they have just decided, well, we're at the top. As long as we stay at the top, it doesn't really matter what happens at the bottom. We'll drive everybody else's wages down. And that is what's happening. And why would democracy, in other words, why would half the people or over half the people think that this was a good idea when it's going to be obviously their head, their neck, their wages on the chopping block next? I'm not for or against it or other. I'm just wondering what they are thinking. Can they not see further than the corner of their room and their television? What is going on in their brains? Can people not see what's going on in the world? That the West has had their day. And the government don't seem to understand it, but the elite rich people maybe seem to understand it and are quite content with it. And as Stiglitz says, throughout history, this is something that the top 1% eventually do learn, but too late, that their fate is wound up with the 99% of their fellow countrymen and women. and grinding them into the dust is a very short-term sort of strategy. I better go and see the cat. Have a good weekend. Bye.